Very good evening. My name is Shanu Narayan. I'm actually thankful to Eurasia Research Group for having given me the opportunity to present the topic implementing cross-border international insolvency law in India. The importance of this topic of cross-border insolvency is very well known to all of us. Before we begin cross-border insolvency law and how it evolved in India and how it has been in practice in India, let me first take you through the definition of multinational enterprises by the OECD guidelines on MNEs, which defined in 2011 that those companies or other entities which is established in more than one country and so linked that they coordinate their operations in various ways. While one or more of these entities may be able to exercise a significant influence over the activities of others, their degree of autonomy within the enterprise may vary widely from one multinational enterprise to another. Cross-border insolvency. If you look at the international law on cross-border insolvency, it starts with the UNCITRAL Model Law on Cross-Border Insolvency, which is otherwise called as Model Law hereafter. The Model Law was evolved to assist states in relation to regulation of corporate insolvency which are facing or financial distresses which involves companies which have assets or creditors in more than one state. Cross-border insolvency is a treatment of assets, how you treat the assets of the corporate debtor which is situated in more than one state, and hence to facilitate CBI, which is cross-border insolvency, in India we adopted Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. This states that for making insolvency resolution process quick and efficient, it is important that you consolidate all the laws relating to applicability in terms of individuals, entities, and so on and so forth. The CBI, cross-border insolvency, it benefits both the applicants, resolution applicant, as well as the debtor. And because committee of creditors is appointed, which does not deliver a revival plan through resolution process, liquidation process could be initiated. So under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, IBC in short, it is important that you either confine to resolution process or liquidation process. For which to resolve CBI disputes, you have two important provisions which discuss this under IBC, which is the Indian law. Coming to the research objectives. The objective of this research is to understand what are the hindrances in implementing model law in India, if we have any, and to examine whether harmonization and standardization across the world could work against individual countries' economic interests such as India. Coming to the Indian context, two frequently found structures of MNEs exist. The first one is an integrated group of a group ownership, whose ownership and control are in the form of pyramid structure, just like the Tata groups, which is famous in India. In such situations, the financial health of company is often dependent on the financial health of the group as a whole, because the parent company's ability to rescue its subsidiary from any kind of problems in future, financial distress in future. The theories of cross-border insolvency completely focuses on two important aspects. One is called universalism, the second is called territorialism. Okay, so when you look at universalism as a theory of cross-border insolvency, it advocates that insolvency law of the debtor shall be applied to all the assets of such debtor, regardless wherever they are located. Which means you are applying universally this on to every asset which is situated anywhere in the world. The second is called territoriality, which means a country which applies its own cross-border law, insolvency law, to all the assets located within its jurisdiction without deferring to any other country's law. So in a particular country, if you have a cross-border insolvency law, you apply the same for those companies which is territorially located. So even if it's an MNC, if it is situated in India, And India has a cross-border insolvency law provisions. In such cases, it can be applied in such situations. So this is called as territorialism. Modified universalism and cooperative territorialism was sought to be addressing the issues in hand. Modified universalism says that unsatural model law became majorly like a harmonized or a structure towards everybody. So it became like it became like, what do you say, a, a, a norm to every party, whoever is becoming a member state of unsatural. So hybrid model is wherein you have both in structure and seeks to combine the advantages of both. So this approach to cross-border insolvency is premised on voluntary cooperation, which means countries, if they want to, they can cooperate, otherwise they need not. Where courts are encouraged to cooperate without courts of other jurisdiction, but they are not obliged to cooperate. It is up to completely them voluntarily. So this is called as modified universalism, wherein model law is getting applicable to countries which accept their norms in definite terms in their own territory. Now, this India has also done so far. Let's see how it is dealt in Indian scenario. There are three situations according to Indian scenario. The first one is where creditors seek to enforce their security interest over the foreign assets of an Indian debtor. Second is when creditors seek to enforce rights over Indian assets of a foreign debtor. The third is when Indian creditors wish to enforce their rights over foreign assets as a foreign debtor. Now, in all these scenarios, what we see here is that the second scenario is very, very straightforward, and it has a direct implication as well. Now, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 deals with scenario where insolvent company may have a number of foreign creditors wanting to ensure their rights to be protected, even though they may not be based in the country where the insolvency resolution is taking place, and has an implication. The IBC does not discriminate between domestic and foreign companies. That is also the key here. So, however, the concept like persons not resident in India, the definition of the term persons, and consequence is that because of such definition, creditors, the new legislations permits foreign creditors also to be treated at par. So, section 234 and 235 of the Indian Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code discusses CBI in detail. We have two major cases. The first one is called Jet Airways case. The second one is ILNFS, Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services case. So let's come to Jet Airways case. This is a classic case in which Jet Airways, which was incorporated in 1992, became India's first private multinational airline company, second only to India's national airline, which is Air India. In the first quarter of 2019, Jet Airways, which still had market share of roughly around 11.9, started dwindling and started suspending their lot of flights because of some restructuring efforts with bank and operational creditors. 2019, insolvency proceedings started against Jet Airways in National Company Laws Tribunal in Mumbai. However, Jet Airways woes were not limited to India alone. So we had a lot of companies. For example, we had Dutch company which was one of the creditors for Jet Airways internationally. So Jet Airways had a lot of creditors across the world. So when the bankruptcy proceedings started in India, similarly, foreign creditors were also concerned, and they also raised their claims in their respective courts. And that's exactly when it was realized that there was a need to have a CBI protocol, cross-border insolvency protocol. The reason is because when the claim was raised before the Dutch court, India rejected this, stating that it cannot be taken in that sense. So the Dutch company filed in India for proceedings against Jet Airways, claiming that they have maximum creditors and they have to protect the creditors. However, India said that in such situations also, Indian creditors are much, much larger, and because of territoriality principle, a hybrid form of territoriality as well as universalism, we also apply model law, and hence India should be given the approach. So India completely relied on model law, unsatural model law, and stated that in such situations, one of the key aspects is which is the country which shall start main proceedings. India accepted this and said that in the NCLT in Mumbai that we will not ask to shift this case to any other country because we have large creditors in India. So what we can do is, in such situation, we will see which is the main proceeding, and hence Indian court's proceeding must be considered as the main proceeding for such insolvency claims, especially Jet Airways. So Dutch company, through its representative, requested that can we have an observer in these proceedings in India. So finally, the CBI protocol was adopted diplomatically between both the countries, India as well as Netherlands, and a Dutch observer was asked to look into this matter clearly. Now, once you are looking into this matter clearly, the question was that whether the CBI protocol could be implemented by any chance. So this protocol gave a lot of rights to each other, and the Dutch administrator, who was the observer then, was also recognized to be one of the committee of creditors and observant in this proceeding. Significance of this protocol is that clause 3 of the protocol states that the parties to the agreement recognize India as the main insolvency proceeding center, and the Dutch proceedings would be only non-main proceedings. The cross-border insolvency protocol adopted in the Jet Airways case is the first of its kind in India and has paved way for use of such protocols to solve disputes bilaterally. Now we come to IL&FS saga, infrastructure leasing and financial services case. This was a company registered in India on October 15, 2018. MCA, which is called as Ministry of Corporate Affairs in India, and NCLT, National Company Laws Tribunal, stayed all the proceedings against IL&FS and its group of companies which operated through a complex network of business verticals that did not squarely fall under the co-hold company subsidiary norm. So, roughly around 302 IL&FS companies out of 133 companies were incorporated outside India. The remaining 169 companies incorporated domestically were divided into three different categories. The committee of creditors hence included roughly 169 companies, domestic companies, and rest from outside India. IL&FS Group insolvency has posed as novel challenges for the nascent insolvency resolution regime in India. The holding company, parent company, took a majority of loans worth 91,000 crores and could not pay back roughly 7,000 crores. The money borrowed was channeled through different 300 corporate companies. It only led that 4 main companies are referred to insolvency, and out of which 10% of the total debt could be taken as a primary one. So several group or network companies were earning profits but with negligible assets, and liquidating them would be literally very difficult in every sense. So in order to deal with this, the suggestion which I would like to make is the committees on CBI to draft guidelines which is accustomed to Indian ecosystem. CBI protocols could be more effective, which is an alternative to the model law, because IBBI, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, should adopt a practice guide to formulating cross-border insolvency protocols based on UNCITRAL practical guide. India came up with a draft guideline on CBI in September 2020. The NCLT, which is the designated authority, came up with the same, and it says that it is also something similar like the UNCITRAL model law. Again, here comes a catch, because when you see how it has been harmonized and incorporated with an Indian structure, that's also very clear. However, there are some basic distinctions when you look at UNCITRAL model law and the basic or draft guidelines on CBI, which was adopted by India. What are the major distinctions at these levels? The first one is how it is because it is applicable to corporate debtors only. Unlike model law, This applies only to corporate debtors, not to any other business entities. Secondly, it completely depends on legislative reciprocity. Legislative reciprocity means that unless and until both the countries want to accept CBI as one of the clauses, the disputes may not be resolved by both the countries. So if we accept that Netherlands also could raise a claim, and both of us are going to accept cooperation as an important criteria, this is called as legislative reciprocity. This is also the second kind. The third is Government of India empowered to exclude states, because Government of India can completely exclude the states of India from the entire concept, stating that it's against public policy, which is also very questionable. Fourth one, limited jurisdiction, which is provided and it is omitted. Express obligation to cooperate to maximum extent possible is not mentioned, which means countries have a choice whether to cooperate or not. So it is completely up to them. One of the important issues is provision of joint hearing, which means if we have similar situations like Jet Airways, again, we could go for joint hearings rather than adopting a CBI protocol. The draft guidelines, while recognizing established principles of international insolvency, seeks to integrate and align the Indian judicial system with international insolvency. And hence, this is considered to be a classic or a recent change in which we have taken a different path from the usual UNCITRAL model of kind, which is already a hybrid model, than adopt something which is like the draft guidelines, which is considered as something which is key for Indian insolvency, cross-border insolvency regime. Thank you very much for your patient hearing, and I thank for giving this opportunity to me. Thank you.